Hello, my name's Benjamin Ellis, originally a technologist and engineer turned marketeer turned CEO, a little bit of a productivity geek. This is what I've learned about work from working on Master Planner over the last few years, talking to people who've used the tool, those who've been phenomenally successful and those who've struggled. Like many people, when I was younger I wanted to be a racing driver, although I probably got more distracted by the chocolate, to be honest. The fact is that actually all of us are racing drivers these days. We're running at breakneck speed, making split-second decisions, and sometimes, unfortunately, going around and round in circles. In the nature of modern work, certainly what happens in most of Europe and the Western Hemisphere, is smart people doing smart things. We're not repeatedly doing the same task over and over again. We're tackling new problems each day, being creative and working with knowledge, collaboratively with other people. That's very different than the kind of work that used to happen in the factory. It's more like the work that happens in the studio. But the fact is that most modern businesses still run like factories. They still run them and manage them like we're doing the same thing over and over again. And that's not the way it is. It's much more like the studio in terms of the kind of work that we do these days. The factory is characterized by throughput, by how quickly you can do the same thing over and over again. It's all about individual steps that can be clearly mapped out, and workflows. It's tasks that are sequentially dependent on one another and a very individual style of working where performance can be measured clearly. The studio is really, really different. It's much more creative. The output is sporadic. We come up with a great idea and then we can execute on it. Maybe it takes us a few days to work out what a presentation should look like. We're interdependent. We depend on other people and they depend on us. It's not a one-way direction. It's a very collaborative environment. The fact is, in modern work, we aren't ploughing fields anymore. With a field, we could wake up and look at it in the morning and say, that's what needs doing. And you could go, hey, Benjamin, that's a really big field that you've got. Well, that's a small field. We could agree on the size of work, on its bounds, and on its limits. Unfortunately, modern work isn't like that. Modern work is endless. It's infinite. There's always more that can be done in a knowledge-based environment. And it's also very, very difficult to measure. Is that a big thing, or a hard thing, or a difficult thing? It's a lot more subjective rather than objective in terms of the style of the work. So to do that work and to create an effective work style, we need to set boundaries. We need to create boundaries about how people interact with us and when they can interact with us. We also need to create boundaries about the amount of work we're going to do, to agree what it's going to be, the size of it, the difficulty of it, so that we know when we're done. Otherwise it goes on forever. So we need to negotiate goals, not just with our boss, but with co-workers and people who work for us as well. To agree clearly beforehand what our expectations are, what's got to happen, what it is that we want to achieve. Notice that that's about outcomes, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But goals aren't set in stone because things change. So renegotiate them. That shouldn't be a bad thing or a negative thing. Renegotiating goals just says things have changed, this is harder or easier than I thought. It should be done with a sense of fun and cooperatively. Too often we stick with goals long after they've become redundant. Working alone can be fun, but also working alone can be dangerous. It's dangerous because of the way that our brains work. We're all biased. In fact, we're very, very biased. We have all sorts of biases with all sorts of complex names, which fundamentally mean that we're not very good at figuring things out on our own. Sometimes we need to get a second opinion. We need to get a reality check. We don't see things like a camera, so it's no good sticking our head on a tripod. That'd be a little bit mad. Actually, we need to move around and take a different perspective on what we're doing, to talk with people and interact with them about the challenges that we're facing. That can be quite difficult in the modern workplace. We also need to focus on measuring outputs, not activities. I'll show the post box here. If I set you a goal of posting 1,000 letters, that's not really a great goal. The great goal is I want 1,000 resolved customer complaints or 1,000 happy customers. It's about outcomes, not activities, not sticking things in the slots. And watch out for anti-work too. My friend Houdini the mouse here came and borrowed my chocolates. Oftentimes work colleagues come and do that. They come and inject things into our work that make it a little bit more difficult, or redefine goals, or do things that actually aren't contributing towards the goals. You need to track it and eliminate it. One of the interesting things about a studio is when you walk into it, you see all of the artists' paintings. They're on the walls, they're stacked up in the corners. The evidence of their work is really, really clear. With knowledge work, it's a little bit more difficult. but we have to hang our paintings, make your work visible and observable, and celebrate success as well. How many of you out there keep a success list, things that you've done really, really well and have really enjoyed? Actually, that one act, doing that on a daily basis or a weekly basis, makes a dramatic difference to your happiness, but also to your productivity. It's a really unexpected thing. Look at what you did well as what you did badly, like that. But also celebrate success together. It's much more fun celebrating success with a group. Get your team together and talk about things that the team's done really, really well. Talk about the difference that you made. Talk about the things that you've achieved. It focuses people on outcomes and what you're good at rather than focusing on the negatives. Use tools to get together virtually. Do that as much as you can, but meet together and eat together as well. It's a really interesting characteristic of teams that stick together and that's successful is just sitting down socially, eating some food, doing non-work related things to build relationships and work more effectively together. So, leave the factory, enter the studio. Stop focusing on activities, start focusing on outcomes, stop being competitive, and start being collaborative and creative in the way that you work, and work in a way that suits knowledge. You can find me online as Benjamin Ellis on Twitter or benjaminellis.org, and do check out Master Planner as well and start setting yourself goals and tracking them. It will make a fantastic difference to your productivity.